So, something that I had posted on Twitter recently that got a little bit of traction was the fact that when Forged in the Barrens came out, QUILBOARs were added to Battlegrounds and to Standard. And unlike every single other tribe that exists in the entire video game, QUILBOARs have no synergies at all, whether it be with themselves or with other cards. Every other tribe in the entire game has at least one form of synergy. Pirates synergize with themselves and weapons. Beasts synergize with themselves. Elementals synergize with themselves. Naga synergize with themselves and spells. Things of that nature. But QUILBOARs have no synergy whatsoever across any of them. There are Death Rattle QUILBOARs. There are Hand Buff QUILBOARs. There are QUILBOARs that are just QUILBOARs to be QUILBOARs and nothing special about them. So I was thinking, okay, what if we were to add, QUILBOARs to Forged in the Barrens and make them relatively close to what QUILBOARs were in Battlegrounds, just like how Nagas, when they were added to Constructed, were relatively similar to Naga in Battlegrounds. Some of the easier minions to talk about are things like Razorfen Geomancer, right? You can obviously just go right here, instantly 1 mana, and of course, if it's going to give you a 0 mana +1/+1 card, it would be a little too strong at 3/1. I think if you were to put it down to 1/1, that would be relatively fair, right? 1 mana 2/2 in stats. That's not even too strong for today's game anymore. When you have things like, Miracle Salesman that are 1 mana 2/2 with another upside. So this would let you either buff itself for 1 mana 2/2 or bank the Blood Gem. I think this is like one of the easiest baseline minions that you can do. Of course, it's currently in Battlegrounds, so it wouldn't be this Geomancer, it would be a different card with a similar effect. So it could be like Razorfen, I don't know, Mancer, I don't know. But you get the idea, right? Where it would be something similar, but it would still follow the lines of this card. On the flip side, you have cards that can buff your Blood Gems, like Prickly Piper, where it could easily go to just being a 3 mana 5/1. There's nothing egregious about this card stat-wise and balance-wise. This could have easily gone in Forged in the Barrens power level for Standard. Your Blood Gems, you could keep them in hand. They'd be, pretty strong to be +2/+1 for 0 mana. A little too strong, you could argue that. But then you could also make the argument that just don't print that many ways to generate Blood Gems, Is it really too strong to have banking all this mana across all this turns with your like Razorfen and then your Geomancer and things like that, and then maybe the Death Rattle one, which is also 3 mana. You're banking all that mana with understated minions to get this effect in hand. That's really not too crazy or egregious for Hearthstone standards, especially when you consider cards like Librams. Librams were a thing, and they were really powerful for a long time for Paladin. This would be like a neutral Libram. It would be a little more powerful in some aspects, a little weaker in others. Like, you wouldn't obviously have, the big 8 mana Libram or 9 mana Libram spell that gets reduced, but it would be similar to the Libram of Wisdom, right? I think it's called the buff one. I don't remember what it's called actually, but the 0 mana +1/+1 Libram. The Blood Gems would be pretty similar to that. So giving something like Prickly Piper a little bit of stand-outedness towards that would be really cool for Standard. Of course, in Wild, I think these cards would be terrible. I'm not balancing these cards for Wild. Of course, I'm putting it to what I remember from Forged in the Barrens power level being. Another one is Thorncaller. I think that Thorncaller probably could be 2 mana. Death Rattle, get a Blood Gem as its only effect. That is relatively similar to other 2 mana cards. There's 2 mana minions that give another minion +1/+1 in, I think it's Sunwell Cleric? Fallen Sun Cleric, right here. 2 mana, 2/1, undead, give friendly minion +1/+1. This is from, what the fuck is this expansion called? Knights of the First Throne? Gosh, I can't remember. And then you had Shattered Sun Cleric in Legacy, which is the same effect, but stuff like, you have Wriggling Horror. This card doesn't even say play anymore, and it was 2 mana, 2/1 for the same effect. So, for the same effective total stats as Wriggling Horror, this is a death rattle, so it is slower, and you get a blood gem. I don't see any reason why a card like this couldn't have existed in Forged in the Barrens. It would have been, decent, a QUILBOAR death rattle to go together. The Forged in the Barrens death rattle package that was QUILBOAR's that we could have seen. It would have been very interesting. Another very easy minion to bring over would be Moonbacon Jazzer. You could keep it at 3 mana. Usually the 1, 2, and 3s, I would say, could stay at their mana cost. Maybe you could argue Jazzer and Piper should be like 4 mana with a bit of stat differences, but Battlecry or Blood Gems give an extra 1 health this game. I don't think that attack extra would be too strong. This is also, remember, Forged in the Barrens didn't have a Leroy and Deckhand in the format. Of course, nowadays, if these were in Standard, it'd be way too fucking strong because there's charge in neutral, but this is not. There was no charge in neutral during this. The entire time Forged in the Barrens was around. That's what, I'm trying to, place these cards in Forged in the Barrens. Of course, something like Jazzer and Piper came later, but you get the idea. This is something that should have been implemented in that expansion. Bongo Bopper is a actual great way to use the entire effect. It would probably be a little more expensive, maybe something like 6 mana for a 6/5, which is pretty standard, but you would get the blood gems also added to your hand. You could maybe make an argument to make it maybe like a 4/5, so it would be a little overstated, being a 6/7, rather than just regular stats. And that would be a little more fair. I think there's no reason that this card couldn't have existed as well. It is a great way to generate gems that is put on a later game stat line, and it is continual, so if it lives, it will just keep growing and growing. Of course, if you have buffs from Piper and from Jazzer, it becomes better as well. This card easily could have existed with the cards that I am proposing as like a QUILBOAR neutral set stuff. Of course, the idea of QUILBOARs and blood gems can be pushed further, actually. Remember that classes that do actually have a fair few amount of QUILBOARs are Priest, Death Knight, and Demon Hunter. They actually do have a fair few amount of QUILBOARs just cause, because it's interesting. So I was thinking, okay, what if, we put them as class cards? Felboar, Fel is in the name. You would change the effect consume a minion in the tavern to gain its stats. Okay, what if it was after you cast 2 spells, consume an enemy minion. Yeah, just after you cast 2 spells, consume an enemy minion, and then say it's going to be, I think 6 mana actually fits a card like this. It would have a little bit less health, probably closer to something like that. But this could be a card that actually exists in current Hearthstone. Demon Hunter is a class about playing a lot of spells. Yes, they have QUILBOARs, and they have consume effects. With a card like Ancient Voidhound. Ancient Voidhound, at the end of the turn, steal 1 attack and health from all enemy minions. Yes, it would be a little bit different. It's steal stats rather than consuming the whole thing, but it would still fit the same idea. Another one could be something like Bristling Buffoon. Whenever this takes damage, get a blood gem. That could easily be a priest minion. You would change it to priest, remove the 3 times per combat, of course. And then just whenever this takes damage, get a blood gem. You could easily change the stats around, make it a little more balanced for priest as a class, but there's no reason that a card like this couldn't fit into priest. Yes, you might be thinking, oh, isn't, taking damage a warrior effect? Yes and no. Priest actually has iconically used a lot of minions that deal damage themselves, even more than Warrior has. So, you have things like Injured Blade Master, or Injured Cavaldier, or Hedonis, or a lot of cards will deal damage themselves, right? So this kind of thematically fits into Priest a little bit. Whenever this takes damage, get a blood gem, or it just could be whenever this is healed, get a blood gem. Oops. That could also work. It wouldn't be too crazy of a change to put a card like this into Priest. Priest also uses buffs a fair few amount of times. QUILBOAR's generating spells is good for things like Priest, Demon Hunter, and in Death Knight also has a fair amount of buffs that it could also use for things like that. This is already a current QUILBOAR for Death Knight. Darkthorn Quilter, at the end of your turn, I don't know why the text is so fucked up. I literally just get it through the import feature. Whatever. This would benefit from getting, the 0 mana +1/+1, or, however many, +2/+2, +3/+3, etc. from blood gems. But it, comes at the cost at a lot of the blood cards being relatively low tempo if you're not playing them already. So this is kind of a part of the idea behind would QUILBOARs kind of work in Standard. I think, or Constructed. I think they would. I think they would if they were used properly. Of course, they need to be balanced properly. They could be very strong to have, bananas or Librams and other classes. It could be very strong. I think this is definitely something that we should explore. Blizzard should explore this, and it's kind of a big miss that they didn't do it when Forged in the Barrens came out. If you enjoy, like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think about the concept below. Do you think that QUILBOARs would work decently well in Constructed? Of course, I took ones just from Battlegrounds. There's a million new designs that you could make for QUILBOARs. They could be Frenzy, they could be... Frenzy was the keyboard one that came out. They could be more Death Rattle, they could do a million different things. They could have Rush, because Rush isn't a thing in Battlegrounds. There's so many different ways that you could make QUILBOARs interesting, and I want to hear what your guys' ideas are below. That being said, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time, and peace.